Yep. Go.
Okay. Studio buddies doing a podcast with a little gay guitar. Hello and welcome to the Studio Buddies podcast with me, Simon.
And I'm Jamie.
And
this is the second part. We didn't bother to change our clothes. Same day.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Oh, just going to be stinky wearing it a whole week later, but no. This is the second part, same day, of the last episode was materials that we do like using, whether it was canvases and sketchbooks and things or paints, and this week is going to be materials and media that we don't like using so much or that we've got a bit of negative feedback for. So look forward to that. A lot of thumbs down. Okay.
So
who would you like to start?
I don't mind.
Well, you started last time. Do you want me to start this time?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah? Okay. So I'm going to start with oil pastels. Now, these are, it's kind of a double sided coin. That's the expression, isn't it? Which means that I like the result of them and I use them all the time, but they're like drawing with lipstick. You know, it's kind of like something a bit slimy and greasy about it. I've never used lipstick. I don't know if lipstick is slimy and greasy, but I imagine it's not like soft pastels, which are kind of like buttery to spread on.
To be honest, I think you'd have a better result using lipstick.
Okay, yeah, I thought as an analogy it's probably flawed because I've never used lipstick for anything. So, but these are they're just kind of like, you've got to press fairly hard. I mean, they probably go on without it, but they kind of go on scratchy. So I press fairly hard to try and get a matte finish so that it's really flush. And they're just really slidey and they're not very nice to use. As far as an actual sensation of drawing, which I do all the time, this is not my favourite. Now, I have been told that oil pastels with terps become oil paints. Sounds amazing. But I've tried that once and it didn't happen. But I have been told that's the principle of oil pastels. Just like soft pastels with water become like a kind of like an acrylic to an extent. You know, you can add water to it and it becomes like that type of thing.
Bear with me just a second. Carry on.
Yeah?
Yeah, my cat is currently being a bit of a nightmare.
I saw you smiling and thought, what's going on there? You've either got something to interject.
There we go.
Simple. Very good. So yeah, that's what I've heard. I don't know if that's true. Leave a comment down below if you know about that. But I've heard oil pastels with water or terps or linseed oil becomes oil paint. Didn't work with these, but these could just be the cheap ones. These are Arts 101 oil pastels, which are quite a cheap company by the looks of them. So maybe with more expensive oil pastels, they do become like oil paints. And if they were, I'd be more inclined to use them differently. And I have done soft pastels with a bit of water, and that is lovely. It's kind of almost like using pigment with egg tempera, but without egg being the medium. So yeah, that's my first one, which is kind of the sensation of using them is horrible. But I still use them, and I use them quite often because the results are good. So there we go.
My first one is also oil pastels. They're like using crayon for me. It's very similar to crayon, and I'm not sure if that's because they're very cheap. I think these ones were very cheap, but they do remind me of crayon, and if I wanted to buy crayon, I would buy crayon. So I just don't like them, and they're quite, like, you can't get an even surface from my experience with them. So yeah, it's never been my medium of choice. I'm not sure if that's because I don't know how to use them, but yeah, I'm not a fan of oil pastels. I'd probably have more enjoyment out of crayons, to be fair. Yeah, so That's also a no from me.
I would say anyone who's using oil pastel, they do layer quite well, and you've got to scrub. But I'm surprised with how well you can mix the colours, seeing as though they feel like a very tacky, cheap medium to use.
Yeah.
But you can achieve certain things with them. For example, let me show you actually. I've recently done some oil pastel. I mean, this isn't great or anything, but just for quick sketches of an idea for walls and things. That was a brick wall. I thought was quite a nice, it's got a blurring effect using the white on top.
Yeah.
So it just made this smudgy motion effect. And then to get a stone wall, using the purple and or the blue and the pink kind of worked. And then again to get some heightened colour of a fence and wall and things like that. That's a university thumbnail studies which I did, which I do think that there's a quality to them where I still use them. I use them for that page as well, just because there's a brightness to them. They've got a nice boldness.
Yeah.
But the actual using of them, I just think using them feels horrible. You're always like, oh, this is going to feel so cheap, and it almost flakes off as well. It has like a flaky thing to it, which is horrible, just cheap,
Yeah.
So that's the negatives of that. So I'm very surprised you didn't tell me that you were going to double up on that. That's very interesting. Okay, my second thing, material that I don't really like using. Now, Jamie, for her in our last podcast, had a lovely set of coloured pencils. Now I have a set of coloured pencils, and they are nice, but I don't actually enjoy them because these are water soluble pencils, which is probably the best aspect of them. Because you can at least then spread them out a little bit. But I don't like the fact that they don't feel great to use to me. And I've never with pencils had the same. I think that's why I love Blackwing so much, is that they just don't have that kind of abrasive surface tension that I get with coloured pencils, where it's not spreading really naturally. It's kind of resisting. I've got this resistance from the surface, so I never really enjoyed them. But I didn't mind the results. Again, it was quite an interesting application of colour. But you are sort of stuck with the colours that they give you. These colours are quite dull, which is quite nice. I mean, I like duller colours, so you can probably see there that the colours they're not super poppy, bright colours.
They're more like earthy.
Earthy tones.
Yeah.
Exactly, earth tones, yeah, very much. And that's better suited to my work because I do have brighter coloured pencils, and sometimes they can be useful. I mean, I like doing just line drawings. If I'm going to have bright pencils, I'm going to use them for just a line drawing because that's not what they're intended for. But for me, they have a quality there where you can actually just use them like I'd use a pen. But I don't know. Yeah, so I really struggle with coloured pencils, and that for me is just a material that I don't use very often and I don't enjoy using really.
I've noticed that normal coloured pencils work a lot better than water-soluble pencils. I feel like the pigment in water-soluble pencils isn't as great, and I think like just the texture of the nibs on the water-soluble ones make them harder to work with. I'm not sure if that's me pulling a statement out of my backside, but that's just from...
No, I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
I think that's how they maybe make them, so that they're water soluble. There's probably some combination of different elements that make them just different than normal coloured pencils. But I will confess, normal coloured pencils I still struggle with because I just don't get the results that I want. It's not the feeling that I enjoy. It's just, I don't know, the process isn't quite as natural for me. But I must admit, I have seen one video on how to sharpen a pencil correctly. And as part of that, he talks about removing a plasticky layer that's on top of the nib. And I never even consider that all pencils have this weird plasticky layer, that once you remove that, you have access to the actual pigment, or the just what you're supposed to be drawing with, the actual material, as opposed to the casing almost. But it's not something I've really thought about. And as soon as he did it, I thought, I've noticed a weird plasticky film around the nib sometimes. Not a physical thing that you can strip off.
Yeah.
But when you're shaving the pencil with a blade, it has a different core than it does on the outside, where it's less shiny, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it goes into a deeper, darker quality on the inside. So I don't know if that's a factor to it. Maybe I'm just ignorant of how to actually prepare these, but it's not been something where I've used them and thought, you know what, I could use those more often. It's quite the opposite, where I think if I needed that sort of finish, then they'll be useful for that, but hopefully I can get around it.
Yeah.
It's just not something I can do.
Piggybacking off pencils, my next one is going to be cheap drawing pencils. This one is Simply. I don't know where I got these from. I think it might have been from some kind of set that I must have gotten for Christmas or something, but as previously mentioned, since using Blackwings, I can't go back to normal pencils anymore. I still enjoy Faber Castell pencils because they are pretty decent quality, but ones like this where you get them in sets, I don't like them. They're too gritty. They're not as, I want to say pigmented, but there isn't really a pigment in a pencil. You know what I mean? Like, you can't achieve darker lines and stuff like that as easily as you can with Blackwing pencils. And just the overall feel of the pencils, they're not that great. They're very scratchy, and I think they're harder to manipulate for me in particular. So mine's got to be like low quality drawing pencils. I can't get behind them. Yeah.
It just doesn't make it enjoyable, does it? And drawing should be an enjoyable thing where you're, you know, pushing the pencil around thinking this feels great, as well as the fact that the more you draw, the more the drawing should improve.
Yeah.
But yeah, with normal pencils, it's a real arduous task. It's almost like a chore to have to do a drawing. So yeah, I think it's the anti-Blackwing.
I think next to Blackwing, if I had to go for another pencil, it'd be a Faber Castell pencil, because they are pretty decent. But anything besides those two, like, I'm not drawing with it.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you. You know, it reminds me, I need to buy a set of Faber Castell pencils, because I've found one once in the gallery in Preston that I was talking to you about before we started recording, and I'd had that in a set, and my set of, it was that pencil, it was some willow charcoal, and I had a piece of that white charcoal, you know, for doing the highlights. And it was just like a nice set of different things. That's gone missing since the first year of uni, and I don't know where it's gone. I was always hoping it was going to pop up, but at that time I was very social, going to loads of people's houses all the time. So I don't know if I've left it somewhere there, but I've lost it somehow. But I do need to buy a set of Faber Castell pencils, because they are great. Well, sticking with the pencils, I'm going to say these, which are a Mars Lumograph Black pencils by Stedler. These were recommended to me by a friend of mine, a very good artist called James Guy Eccleston, who I recommend. And he was right. These get much darker than Blackwings can go. Much darker. And that's great. But they are similar to how oil pastels feel waxy and unpleasant. These feel waxy and unpleasant to use. But the finish is so good. And it's not the finish is so good, but the finish is so much different. You've got such a greater range with this set than you have with any other pencil, that I do find myself still using them. But it's an unpleasant process. You know? It just isn't what I want to do when it comes to drawing. I don't want to have to push and put loads of pressure on the pencil all the time. Now, you don't have to put loads of pressure on it, but when there's such a waxy feel, it doesn't feel like that buttery spread that you have with a Blackwing. So I don't like that. You know, I just don't appreciate that sort of interaction that I have with the tool. I really want it to kind of feel like an extension of my arm, and that doesn't. It feels like something I'm picking up and jabbing at the surface to try and achieve a result, and struggling. So yeah, I'm unfortunately putting those on, even though I put these in my, not the last podcast, which was the positive things, but I put them in the podcast previous to that, which was how to get motivated. So it's quite ironic that I'm saying motivated and yet really difficult motivation, because I was saying that using different types of pencils can make you do drawings where otherwise you'd say maybe do a drawing, maybe not. If you've got a new set of pencils, you'll do a drawing. That's what this was, and that's why it was recommended as a way of getting you motivated to do art. But it's also on the list of things that I don't really enjoy. So that's what this is, unfortunately.
Could you like possibly use the Blackwing and then use that on top? It's kind of...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Because then you're not using those ones for the whole thing, and it might be a bit more enjoyable to just get like the darker parts with those ones.
I don't know what's wrong with me as far as I've got a real problem with... if I'm using Blackwings, I want to use the Palomino Blackwing and the 602.
Yeah.
I don't really want to introduce another pencil because it's outside of the Blackwing set, and I don't know why. There's no merit to that, but I want to use those pencils because they're coupled together, just like the Mars Lumograph black pencils. I want those to be, that set of pencils is everything that I'm going to use for this drawing.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It's the same with mixed media art. I can't do it.
Yeah.
Because I think, well, I can't start with a biro and then add oil pastel, and I know I'll get a result where I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I think I really struggle with introducing things that feel mismatched. I don't know why that is. I don't know what my barrier is where I can't get over that, but that is something which I've struggled with, and it's made the university difficult as well because that's very much encouraged.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing it. Not easily anyway. I'm really struggling. So you're probably right, and I will try, but that will be a hurdle that I need to achieve.
Yeah.
Crossing, getting over.
Yeah. I think pause there and I can go on to my next one.
Let me just check.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, so my next one is gonna have to be spray matte varnish. I really don't like it. I'm not sure if it's because it's matte that I don't like it. But when I've used it on top of, you know, like any chalk and charcoal drawings I've done, it just leaves this really gritty texture over the top of it, and I really don't like it. I think I probably need to find one that isn't matte, but then I'm afraid that if I find one that isn't matte, how it's going to affect the chalk and charcoal, because I've noticed that with this, when I spray it on, it leaves like this weird stain almost on the page, and it kind of like if I try and do any light bits of chalk or light bits of charcoal, it just loses it completely, and I don't know why that happens, and it's not one that I'll use for painting, because I don't want it to ruin any paintings that I do. So I use like a satin varnish for that. But this, I'm not a fan. And I remember when we went I think it was when I did my foundation in college, my tutor was saying not to use hairspray because hairspray doesn't actually do much. It still ends up just rubbing away over time, and to get some kind of spray varnish. But I think I made a poor varnish decision. I don't know why I got matte. I think it's probably because I just didn't know what I was doing. And I've noticed that, like, at first I was spraying it like in my sketchbook, and then the page just had this really weird gritty feeling to it, and it just goes through me. And I'm not sure if that is because it's matte, but I hate it so much.
That's interesting. The thing is, I was going to say that I only use hairspray for charcoal and pastels and things like that. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but it does create a seal to some degree where I've used it successfully, where I think that's now protected as much as you can.
Yeah.
I've never done varnish on that because spray varnish to me has always been for sealing a painting if it's going to be at any risk of outside elements at all, any kind of water or anything like that. But it does darken whites. So I used to do sign writing, and when I did a white sign and I sprayed it with the spray varnish, I was told to make sure that I kept an equal distance away from it to make it a very light spread, and I don't need to go over it and over it and over it. I just need to coat it once all over.
Yeah.
And then once I've done that, I can use a much heavier varnish, and the heavier varnish won't smudge any of the painting underneath because that will seal it. Again, much like the hairspray does to the pastel drawing.
Yeah.
So my experience has been using the spray varnish, and I got one from B&Q, so it's not the same as the Winsor & Newton one, but I have seen that one. And I just did a light mist over this giant sign, and it was painted really delicately, so I was scared about using an outdoor, varnish for it, because it's such a heavy varnish that I was concerned it was going to push some of the lines of the lettering and make it, smudged. And it didn't. It did a great job of it, but it did dark. Is that your cats? What's that noise I'm hearing over the headphones? I keep hearing it.
I'm not sure if he's making a sound because I've got earphones in. I can't hear him.
Right.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah. So sorry, that distracted me because I thought, is it a siren? What is it? Is it a cat? So yeah, my experience has been hairspray for charcoal and pastel, but that's not in a sketchbook. I do charcoal and pastel on paper, and then it goes on the wall, or it goes under a frame. So that being sealed just means that it's somewhat protected from the sun,
Yeah.
Whereas you're right, with the spray varnish, it is like almost beads of plastic, which is not nice. That's what that gritty thing is.
Yeah.
But if it's on a sign and then you varnish with like a heavy varnish on top, it doesn't really hurt because you're just giving them a sign, they're putting it up, it's way away from your fingers or anything tangible. So that's been my experience. I've had great experience with the spray varnish, but that's because I've been doing it on signs, I suppose, and artwork which is being on the wall for a shop. So
I think I'm probably not using it properly. I don't know. I prefer liquid varnish for paint. Like even if I'm not going to frame it, I'll still put a satin varnish on it anyway because I like the finish of satin varnish. So I think I just need to find a new one because I really don't like how gritty it is.
Maybe try the B&Q one to see if it's more mild, because I found it to be good as far as you can literally just do a mist, and that way your satin varnish won't push any of your painting lines across at all, which it can be such a heavy solution that something like acrylic can be just too delicate, I suppose, for such a thick liquid to go on top. So that's why the spray mist just seals it in and protects it to an extent.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, I mean, I could be wrong, but that's been my experience, and I've done not a lot, but I've done several sign writing jobs and a bit of artwork jobs where that was a reliable method for me, so I recommend it to that extent. Yeah. But no, I appreciate that. As far as the Winsor & Newton one, I'll take that as a criticism of that brand for now.
Yeah.
Right, my next thing for what I don't like will be notebooks. Now this is a lovely moleskin notebook. I just don't like having to write full stop. I just don't like having to I was going to say anything or write for uni, but I don't really like writing, I don't think. I mean, I used to write lyrics years ago. I mean, a lot, like books and books. And I love that, but I hate having to write down stuff for uni. My writing goes all scribbly and out of control, and I end up just doing drawings, and I prefer doing the drawings in there than I do doing the writing in there. It's just a struggle for me, so it becomes partially more drawings than it is writing, and writing becomes a tiny bit, drawing becomes a large part, because that's what I prefer. I just don't like having to constantly write lists of things that I don't find interesting or engaging. And it was just a requirement for uni, like what is your routines and what do you think about still life, and what's I don't know, like starting almost a diary or a journal, and I just thought I don't really want to do that. So I'd end up doing like double page spreads of drawings on lined paper, because I'm like, I don't like this sort of, I just hate it. I hated it. I hate doing it. And I think it might be my resistance to university because of problems that have been happening since the end of the first year, and I think maybe not even the end of the first year, since I started uni, and I realised certain things weren't what I was hoping for. And then I think I just have this idea of a tutor who left in the first year, or I think he left in the second year. If he would have stayed, and if all the tutors were like him, but different disciplines. Like one was, performance, and one was painting, and one was whatever. Because he wasn't. He was very, ruler and pencil and kind of very,
Yeah.
If they were all his kind of passion for the university, for the course, and for teaching, I think I would have done the writing neater. I think I would have taken more time to make sure it was a better reflection of how I feel and think about things. But because I don't have that, it's really based on my rejection of the approach that certain tutors take. And I think I just push back against that in several different ways. One is the art that I make, another is the way that I can write and I can deliver things. And it's just a real battle, it's a real struggle for me. So the notebook is a reflection of my resistance to that, I think.
See, I think I'm the opposite to you, because I've noticed that if I'm looking at PowerPoints or something like that, I have to write it in a notebook before I can process what's there. So any of the work that I have to do where we're looking at PowerPoints or something as reference, I have to write it down in a notebook, otherwise it doesn't go in.
That's interesting, yeah. That's part of I think that's part of how you process information, isn't it? How you can kind of take it in. And I do struggle with processing information, but I've not been able to reconcile that with writing or with anything. PowerPoints don't help me either. But I do think that the way that he taught what he taught worked for me, because I trusted him and I engaged with whatever he'd say. I would do it because I'd know that he was someone who was a professional. He'd show us his work, he'd show us his sketchbooks, he'd talk about the theory and then talk about the practice.
Yeah.
I think it's more that than it is, because I really don't engage with PowerPoints, and it's almost nothing but at university. So I know what you mean.
Because I noticed that if we were working from a PowerPoint and I just read it, I'd get through a few slides and I'd be like, wait, what? So it is quite tedious, because I will have to write down everything that's on each slide. Otherwise my brain just won't recognise that I've read anything. So I don't get fancy notebooks for stuff like that. I buy like really cheap ones, because I know that they're probably going to end up being thrown away at some point, especially once uni's over. But I think I've got like 3 notebooks for uni. One of them is for when we did our dissertation. One of them I think is for more creative futures, and one of them is for any ideas that I have, but I don't tend to use that one as often because, as I've said before, I'm not good at putting my ideas down on paper. Yeah.
Well, I must say they were a gift from a friend of mine, and I really appreciated it. She's a singer and a dancer, and she was good at drawing as well. She was just a lovely person, and she was only young. She was my friend's daughter. She is my friend's daughter, and she just said, "Oh, I've got a gift for you for when you start uni," and brought me one of her notebooks, which was just, I love it. It's moleskin as well, which is such high quality. So I thought, this is great, and I don't know. Yeah, so it was. I think I feel a lot of guilt around.
I think, have my headphones just died? Oh wait, no, they're back in
no.
now. They're back in now. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure if they're dying.
Oh dear. So I just felt guilty about that with the notebook. So that was a lovely gift, but I couldn't use it right.
I think for my next one, which might probably not be a shock actually, is paper. I don't tend to just use sheets of paper for things. I feel like paper for me, if I do something just on a piece of paper, it's loose and it gets damaged, and if I had to, I would try and put it all in a sketchbook, as much as I don't like them, because just having like rolls of paper, I don't know, it just doesn't work well for me. They end up getting damaged, and I'd prefer to have them all in one place, compact, so if I am going to use a sketchbook, it is for loose paper that I've stuck in. And also, like, trying to get... I'm not sure if it's just a struggle that I've had, but unless you go into an art shop, say if like you're buying paper off Amazon, sometimes it's hard to see the quality of the paper, so you'll end up getting paper and it's absolute crap. It's like working on printer paper, and I don't enjoy it. I don't really enjoy paper in general. I mean, this one isn't too bad because it is quite thick, but I don't know, it just seems messy to me and I don't like it because my mind is already messy and I don't want my work to be messy as well. And it's kind of tedious because obviously anyone that has a lot of paper, you typically roll it to keep it compact, but then when you want to use it, it's in a roll and you have to try and unroll the paper, and it's just an absolute nightmare. And I bought some paper when I was at my partner's mum's to do some artwork, and I bought way too much paper because I didn't realise how many sheets were in a pack, and it came all flat, not rolled, so I had to spend about an hour rolling this paper so that I could take it on the train home, and it was just such an effort, and I only needed like 4 sheets.
No.
Yeah, so I have an abundance of paper and I don't think I'm going to use any of it anytime soon, because I don't really like painting on paper either because it's just not sturdy. If I did watercolour I probably would, but I haven't ventured down that avenue just yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, paper.
Yeah, I need to get you a stapler because that way at least then you can keep them all together and go, right, you're not being rolled up, you're now a pad.
Well, to be fair, I was able to get this thing from the works and it's literally to hold paper. It's like this long tube, you roll the paper, you stick it in, and it's in like this compact tube. But I didn't realise how much paper I bought, so I had to buy 2 of them to make the paper fit. And it just seemed like so tedious to have paper when I could get compact canvas boards, you know? So I just, if anyone wants any paper, let me know. I have way too much.
We'll have a competition where you can win paper.
Yeah, send me a DM.
Money.
No, I'll give it for free. I'll probably find someone that will have more use. Maybe my little brother. But yeah, just a paper, man. I'm not a fan. Not a fan.
No, I definitely think you made a great point about it being rolled up so that when you do use a page, it's kind of like, it's like some slapstick comedy where you just got this physical struggle with the paper. Well, you've got to roll it back on itself, which means that you could dent it. You can dent paper. Where you've now got an indentation in the paper that you can't do anything about. It's like you created a wrinkle and a crease in paper that's just not fixable.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is a flaw.
Hate paper. Okay.
Great cut point.
Let me just check. Yeah.
All right. So since we're talking about basic artist materials that we're just rejecting as things that we don't like, I'm going to go with paint. Acrylic paint.
How dare you?
How very dare you? No, it's something which I love and hate. So it's not a full dislike, but it's kind of, I get a real anxiety over painting and I don't know why. And whenever I have to do a painting, there's a build-up of nerves and stress, and it's a real unpleasant feeling that I'll create all the environment ready to do a painting and then I won't do a painting a lot of the time. This happens a lot. And if I actually manage to do one, excuse me.
Bless you.
And if I actually manage to do a painting, then it'll be something which I'm trying to finish. And I'm just trying to get through sometimes. Sometimes it's not an enjoyable process. And I have described it to someone who paints a lot as an ordeal. And he found that hilarious and really liked that fact that I said that. But it's not therapeutic for me all the time. Sometimes it is. It depends. I don't know what it depends on. It's not that it depends on what I'm painting. I don't know what changes in the conditions, but sometimes when I think when I feel like I have any level of competence, I think I feel quite happy to go, I know I can do this. a lot of the time with paints, I think it's a lack of confidence, and that really stresses me out to think you're using something which is, it's got so many great possibilities and potential to it, and yet I'm so bad at using it properly, and I don't have a great vision of what I want the finish to be like, whether I want realism, whether I want a clean finish, whether I want an abstract, or whether I want, impressionism or expressionism. I can't make those decisions easily. So with drawing I can, and it's not that I can see what I'm doing, it's just that I'll start drawing and then I'll go, yeah, this will be cool and that'll be cool, and I'll go this way, and I can't do that with painting. It's more, I'm at the whims of the brush and the paint and what that's going to do to me, and it's like being possessed by insecurity. It's really tricky for me, so I really find that an unpleasant and stressful thing, even if it is Galleria, which is nice paint, and it's nice paint, and I use it quite often. I use basic colours because I appreciate the palette, but there's just some barrier between me and the therapy of the painting process, and as much as I'd like to get over that, and that's one of the main intentions behind doing a fine art course, that's not happened. So I don't know. Yeah, so it's painting. I'm afraid it's acrylic.
Blasphemy. Okay, so my next one is probably me being a bit picky, but I'm going to give a bit of a story first. When I lived in the hostel, I got a grant. I don't know who it was by, but it was a certain amount of money allocated to different things that I would need. So one of the ones was money to art supplies, because I was predominantly doing an art course. I wish I knew more about who gave me the money, actually. I had to provide proof of receipts and stuff like that, just to show that I wasn't taking the money and going away with it. And I went to Castell in Liverpool, and I went absolutely ham in there. I got so much, and I'm very appreciative. And one of the things I got was a really nice set of fine liners. I haven't been back there since, so I haven't been able to get them. So my dislike is any fine liner that isn't that fine liner. And I don't remember what that fine liner is.
Oh.
Yeah.
No.
It was similar to a set like this. Didn't come in like the flimsy plastic. It had like a hard plastic case, and the fine liners were really nice. Like they didn't dry up really easily or anything like that. The pigment was great. And I've just been so disappointed by every other set of fine liners I've had. Ideally I should go back there and get some. But the reason that I don't like any other fine liner that I've tried, I mean there could be really great ones out there that I haven't found, is because they dry up really quickly, or the nib splits. So for stuff like these, like the lower quality things, they don't last as long, and that really annoys me, because this set that I had lasted for ages. And every single time I would use the fine liner, it was like I was using a new fine liner each and every time. It was brilliant, it was beautiful, and none of them have lived up to my expectations since. Which is why in the previous episode I mentioned that I prefer Biro, because I haven't found those fine liners since. I barely remember what they look like, and that's a problem. So it's mainly me being me, but I need to find that set again, because I've just been so disappointed by all of the other fine liners. And where I live, there isn't really that many high quality art shops that you can go into, so all of the ones in my area don't carry those fine liners. And yeah, it's just been a disappointment, because I want them to be the other ones, but they're not. And that's the problem. That's why I don't like them.
Oh, right. So I don't even know what they look like. So it can't even be like, they might be Copics. Because have you tried Copics? Because those are more expensive.
But if they change their packaging, I'm never going to know what they were.
I know. Yeah, and you might have that kind of disbelief where you're using it going, it is nicer, but I don't remember it looking like this. You know, and it might not return you to that same feeling.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think that's me being picky and a bit dim. But yeah, they've never lived up to that, and it's quite sad, really.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to retaliate against your fine line of dismissal and say my next one is going to be paint, acrylic paint again. It is.
My God.
Acrylic paint twice. But this is an especially cheap set of acrylics. So I'm not just having a go at acrylics. This is when you've got cheap paints. Now, don't get me wrong, you can do good things with cheap paint, but even the example painting they've got on here show. Yeah, there we go. Now you have expressed a kind of affinity with cheaper paints because you can still use them, but I think that there's when acrylics feel thin, I don't like them. When they feel watery and they're not opaque, you know, when they're partly transparent, that really frustrates me because I hate having to paint with acrylic and then wait for it to dry and paint the same thing over it again just so that I have a block opaque kind of finish over the top. It's partly transparent, and that's really ugly to me. And this example, I don't know if you can see the example on the box, but it's full of transparency. And it's not a bad image because it's quite colourful, but it looks like very basic colours. It doesn't look mixed, these colours. They look like straight out of the tube colours. Yeah. And it looks very transparent. Like, if you can see it clearly, it looks like you can see through the layers. It's not block. It's very much like done with a big fat round brush. Not a big fat round brush, that sounds nice. It looks like a basic kind of frilled out round brush that you get with every cheap paint set for kids. I don't know. I don't mean to criticise the artist because it's not actually a bad piece, but I just mean that the paint itself is not great. And I think that can make a difference to your engagement with the materials and your ability to try and render anything that you've got potential in your imagination or any reference that you're using. Yeah. If you're using, you know, paints that are just not working with you, it just makes it so much more difficult. So I'm afraid that it's not just acrylics either, because I've had this with oil paints where cheaper oil paints have just made whatever job I'm doing twice as hard because it just won't sit on the surface as I imagined it would. And it takes twice as much effort to try and get anything working in place as you're trying to achieve. So yeah, paint is rubbish.
I'm offended. Well, now I'm going to go at you. Okay? Soft coloured pastels.
No! How could you?
I'm not sure if this is due to my lack of experience and the fact that this set was dirt cheap. But I don't know, I found these to just be unreliable. Like, some of them the pigment was nice, other ones it was just next to none. And I'm not good with coloured pastels to begin with, which I think could also be why. That's not what my forte is. So, I don't know, I just don't like them. I tried doing it for some thumbnails that I did in my sketchbook, and I preferred using chalk and charcoal because it was more consistent than these. It could be because they are very cheap and rubbish. Yeah. And I saw it and I was like, there's all the colours, this'll be great. Wrong. Wrong. And some of them, like, they're really hard and they're not as soft as you'd think they'd be. So I'm not sure if the manufacturer just doesn't do quality control, but that's what it seemed like.
Have you ever done it where when you're using one and it chips a big block out of it away and it just crumples down? Have you had that? Because I hate that.
Yeah, that's what happens with these.
£1.
Yeah, it happened with these. And like I said, some of them, the pigment was alright, and then other ones, especially more towards the purples, and I understand that manufacturing purples is probably quite difficult, because I know that it is for makeup. Just making a purple in general isn't easy. But they were bad. Like, never again am I going to use these. I think I'm probably going to give them to my little brother so he can mess around with them, whatever he wants to do. But yeah,
such good hand-me-downs. He's going to get a load of paper. He's going to get soft pastels.
I know, right?
Loads of stuff.
God, where was the me when I was young? But yeah, it was such an ordeal trying to get even pigment with each coloured pastel. There was like so many layers that I had to do, and still it was patchy and it just looked really bad. So I don't know. And I'd see people online where they were like, oh yeah, you can use like a paintbrush to do like light washes of pastel and stuff. That doesn't work for these. There's nothing. Like, it makes the paintbrush a different colour somewhat, but nothing comes off.
So if you want to paint a paintbrush, you use soft pastels to change the colour of your paintbrush.
Yeah, but nothing was transferring on. And when some of it did go on the page, as soon as like you'd move the page, it would just roll off because it hadn't actually stuck to the paper.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And it made a mess, an unnecessary mess. There was just no need. Oh, never again.
It sounds like a great title for a book, A Necessary Mess.
Yeah.
It'd be a great title for a novel.
It made an unnecessary mess with little to no payoff. And I've never been more disappointed in a material in my life.
I mean, I've had failures with soft pastels.
Yeah.
Where I tried to do a landscape and it just didn't happen. And I asked the professional artist that was mentoring me at the time, and she'd said, "You've gone for colour instead of tone."
Yeah.
And I just thought, how do you ignore colour when you're doing a landscape? How do you go like, well, the tree's green, but I want the tone, so blue? You know, you just don't do that. You kind of go, it's got to be green, you know. But I don't know. I never like using a material where it's like the tree's green, so I'm going to get green. That's why I like paint in the way that you can say the tree's green, but I'm going to make it a kind of grey green.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it a blue green. And I'm going to completely remove it from what's in the tube by using another tube to make that very different.
Yeah.
And with soft pastels, you've got to kind of go on top of it. So it means you've got to apply green before you can get a blue or a grey or whatever to push that away from what the initial charcoal pastel stick is, you know, showing you.
But there's one artist that I really like, and I've mentioned her on this podcast before, Kathy Hildebrandt, and she does realism in soft pastels. And after my experience with those soft pastels, I was completely baffled as to how she creates realism using soft pastels, because I remember sitting there and being like, how she does that is pure magic, because I can't even get these pastels to stick to the paper. So how she achieves realism with it, absolutely crazy. Like, mind-boggling.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I've used expensive soft pastels, which were, you know, owned by my mentor at the time.
Yeah.
And I had much better results, but I do impressionism. That's mainly my approach and my finish that I achieve is, and it's not by design, it's just by that's what happens.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I think, right, I'm going to really try on this one, and it'll still come out like a blurry squiggliness, which is impressionism, which I just kind of go, so long as I've got a light source that I've really focused on, I forgive myself for a lot of the mistakes, because I think there's a quality to impressionism which is really valuable to me.
Yeah.
When it's all really messy and loosely applied, and yet you know that they've observed really keenly what is the source of light and what is the, you know, areas of shadow.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that balance in painting or drawing or any kind of art making, if you can see that happening. So yeah, just to give me an opportunity to show my soft pastels that have successfully worked, because I think I'll be able to find, I'm sure I photographed the ones which have failed, and if not, then I'll show you the ones that I'm looking at on my wall, which are just stupid experiments with soft pastels that are not impressive, but they're what I end up doing just to try and see what happens when you don't care about realism.
Yeah.
And you're just saying what happens to pastels when you're, right, I'm going to go with the pink, like the flesh tone, then with the yellow, then with the red, then with the blue, and just seeing how it layers up and what happens was a real education to me. So that's why I've kept it on my wall, is that I can see possibilities in there of achieving a nicer effect purposefully, as opposed to just play, which is what that was, which is what I'll be showing on the screen at the moment.
Okay.
So I'll take that on the chin, soft pastels.
Yeah. Okay. No. Okay. Right.
Stop there.
Yeah.
Now I'm recording.
Okay.
Okay. So it's me next, and thing which I really think is a crappy medium is paint. Sorry. My next one is paint, but this is a specific type of paint. All right. This
hurts.
If you're doing soft pastels, I'm coming at you. No, I did this one because this is called Sign Painter's One Shot, and I used this on a sign which I was going to make for my dad's shop, and it was so unpleasant to use. It was like painting with tar. It was like really sticky, and I think it's because I didn't have I didn't know the medium to use with it. So I had paint, but I didn't know what to use to make it flow, and I don't know what I did at the time, but whatever it wasn't good enough. So I just abandoned the sign and told him, I don't know, you're going to have to get a professional sign writer to make you one out of plastic, unfortunately. And he still hasn't got a sign, so he's still got a shop without a sign up. But that is just to show you. That is Sign Painting One Shot. And to show the camera. So that is not normal. It's not just acrylic paint. It's not oil paint. It's not, I don't think it's enamel. Could be a type of enamel. I'm not sure. But either way, it's unpleasant for me, but it's because I was ignorant of how to use it. I can imagine it's probably nicer, because sign writing, you've really got to have flow and a nice kind of calligraphy style ability to really manipulate it. And this didn't give you any of that ability because of how I was using it, I imagine. So for this, my experience with it was just the least enjoyable. It was the opposite of oil paints, where oil paints feel like cream, like literally like a nice clotted cream that you're pushing around that's really, really creamy and rich. This felt tacky and kind of like, melted chewing gum or something. It was really unpleasant. So,
sorry, just like the clotted cream way of describing oil paint.
Yeah. There's just something beautiful about that. I mean, it's just, I don't know, maybe it's my memory of that specific oil painting class that I was at, where I had this Jackson's white oil paint, and it just made all of my horrible oil paint bind together all of a sudden, because initially it wasn't. And it just, clotted cream was all the way I can imagine it, because it was such a thick sort of, it wasn't like a cream, like a, whipped cream, because that would be, again, too much air and too much water or whatever. Push right through it with a brush. So it was like a real clotted cream, it was nice. So, yeah.
Until I actually had clotted cream, right? My thought of clotted cream as a child was that it was pretty much cottage cheese, and I couldn't understand why people would want like cottage cheese on a scone. I don't know why, but I was like, why would you want chunky cottage cheese on a scone? That's gross, especially with jam. Like, no. I enjoy clotted cream. I quite like it now, but that was I was always like, no, I'm not having clotted cream. That's wrong. That's gross. Yeah. I just thought
that's why it made you giggle. That's why. Yeah. That's what your oil paints are for me.
Oh. Yeah.
But yeah, so sorry to keep adding on to paint and also paint, but yeah, that's the third paint that I'm putting on this is not good.
My feelings are hurt.
You haven't seen my last one yet.
Oh God.
Oh, so funny.
Okay, so my next one, as people could probably guess, because we've spoken about this quite a bit, is a sketchbook. I hate them so much. I hate the fact that you have to put absolutely everything in there. You have to describe everything.
Yours looks great. Look at how great yours look.
That's from the Van Gogh Alive exhibition.
Brilliant.
And I'm not good at talking about my work in any way whatsoever. It might seem like I am. it's a lie. Putting all of my thoughts down, I absolutely...
It's almost like scrapbooking, you know, because you've got like kind of scrapbook element to it, which is so perfect for university, and I can't do that at all. Colour palettes. It's good stuff.
But even still, my sketchbook isn't good enough. And like, even during my feedback, I was told that there wasn't enough in there because I wasn't looking at contemporary artists and stuff, but I'm not good at that. The only reason I had a good sketchbook in foundation was because my tutor was like, if you don't go home and make a sketchbook every single day, I will know, and you will not pass, and I will check tomorrow to see whether or not you've done sketchbook pages, because you need to. And it was that constant, like, trying to force me into it. And to be fair, my sketchbook, very full. But I think that's why I don't like it. And when I first started uni, I was like, okay, I'm going to try and do as much sketchbook stuff as I can. But because the tutors weren't that bothered, it just completely slipped, and I can't get back into it. And then when I do get back into it and I do start doing sketchbook stuff, it's not good enough. Like, I'd prefer to have a sketchbook where I can just put, you know, like drawings and stuff that I've done. So I think for the first part of my sketchbook, I did, like thumbnails and stuff on paper that I had cut out and stuck in. That doesn't bother me. It's just all of the other stuff that I absolutely despise. If you are going to get a sketchbook though, I recommend Gecko. They've got it's decent pages and spiral, so you can fold it. And I used to baffle my teachers in foundation as well, because we would always have portrait sketchbooks, but I would deliberately use them landscape, because I don't like portrait sketchbooks either. They're like the bane of my existence. So even though it wasn't spiral bound, I would still just landscape, because no.
That's brilliant.
I don't like it at all. I've kept all of my sketchbooks besides the first one for uni, because I think that got thrown in the bin when I didn't pick up my stuff. I don't know.
So it's more like the tool you don't like, as opposed to the actual idea of a portrait. I mean, would you mind a portrait on a landscape frame, or do you just not like portraiture drawing and painting? You prefer landscape and still life as opposed to portraiture?
Yeah, I prefer landscape and still life, but I won't use a sketchbook as like portrait like that. So with your notebook, I would turn it sideways and use it that way. That'd
be really interesting to write, you know.
Yeah, I was that person.
Should have done that. Amazing.
I detest it so much. I don't know why. I just do. I remember second year of uni, I had a 3-month extension, and for the last month I was just doing sketchbook pages because I was so far behind on it, and I would try and do like 10 sketchbook pages a day, because I just... Whoa. Yeah, it was bad. I can't stand it. And you've got people that are like writing everything down in their sketchbooks, like all of their ideas. I don't get it.
No, I mean, I don't think I use sketchbooks that way either. If I had to, it'd be more like a journal or a diary, and I can't do them that way. It'd ruin my sketchbook. The most I've used mine is for thumbnails, as I've just shown you a moment ago. And that's easier for me because I don't mind little squares of pictures. It reminds me of comic books, and I quite like doing little squares because it doesn't take as long and they can look like a nice patchwork together. That's why I like your sketchbook, is it's like loads of little squares. Yeah. I couldn't do it because it's a lot of printing and sticking things on. Which, like I said, is like scrapbooking, which I just can't do. I mean, if I could do it, I wouldn't do it, you know, but I can't do it anyway, you know. But I admire other people who have that because it's a nice look. It's a nice thing to flick through. I don't dislike the finish. I just like the process myself. But yeah, so I understand. Yeah. Hopefully, as you said a moment ago, I don't think on the recording, I don't know, sketchbooks might change after university so that they become a bit more of an enjoyable process of play and exploration and experimentation for you, instead of having to document ideas and trying to develop an idea, being forced to do it.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
No.
So, okay, last and maybe least, because, it might not be the best thing. The palette. I can't use it. I don't like the palette that much. And I struggle because this to me is it's a thing to keep. This is not a one-time use for how to, put paint down and then get it on the canvas. It's like, this is something which I would put the paint on, mix it, do a painting, and then try to scrub it off as much as possible, because this can't go in the bin.
Yeah.
Even if I had a ton of these, I can't throw things like this anyway. But I don't have a ton of these, I have one. And I can't imagine me using this. I'll try at some point, but I don't know how that'll go because I'm not good at it. If you bear with me a second, I'll show you what I do use. 1 minute.
I'm all alone.
I'm back.
There's no one besides me, but you gotta have friends.
Wicked, no way. I would have stayed out longer if I would have made you singing for us. Great. Okay, what I use for a palette is an egg carton.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
They're going in the bin anyway. They're see-through, which means that the colours are going to be true. And it works just as well. You mix your colours, you put them on there, cover it with cling film, and you're pretty much good to go.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, makes more sense than having a product that is specifically designed to put paint on and mix onto. And it just feels, I don't know, I think it is frugalism is my ideology and my philosophy of life, is to try and save as much money as possible. I'm unfortunately, just not, I don't have enough money to spend on a lot of things, so everything that I do have is precious, and everything that is going in the bin is sometimes precious. It's not, doesn't have to be something you spend money on. It's just, if it's like a little twist tie on things, I just think that feels functional. That feels like something where you can make a little framework. I never do. I never use them, but I keep them. I've got tons of things that I've kept and never used. It's like the little foil cups for cakes, when you get like little cakes in a tray. I keep the foil because I'm like, I can't throw that away. It feels like something I could mould and sculpt. I don't mould or sculpt. I don't do that. But I keep them. I've got a stack of them there.
You're a hoarder.
I know, dirty little hoarder. So yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem. I've got.
Why don't you try drawing on the palette instead?
Probably not a bad idea. It just feels, I don't know, it feels like, I think drawing for me goes on cardboard because cardboard's going in the bin, whereas this doesn't feel like it's going in the bin, so I struggle. It's like I can draw on sketchbook covers because it's a kind of throwaway thing. It just feels like cardboard.
Yeah.
Whereas, I struggle inside sketchbooks more than I do on the cover. Usually I draw on the sketchbook cover because that's not meant to be drawn on. And then inside the sketchbook, I'm like, oh, it's all clean paper and it's going to be the first thing someone sees and what's it supposed to be, what would set the tone, and all this kind of pressure and expectation that isn't intended for sketchbooks at all. But that's just a weird psychological issue I have with several things. I don't know what it's about, but that's where I struggle. And one of them is the palette. And it's a real strange, cliched artist thing is to have your palette.
Yeah.
And I don't use that. I use bits of rubbish instead. So I think it just works just as good. So I don't know. So I don't know. I think if I were to draw on this, I think it would really upset me that I didn't paint on it. And I think that's why I am going to paint on it, is because what I think I might do is varnish it first. That way I can move the paint off easier, because it's not at the moment. It's kind of, the paint will get in there and you'll see it forever. Whereas if I varnish it, it should wipe off easier.
Yeah.
I think. So I might do that. Plus I made a mess of removing the packaging. So it's got this mess on the back.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
That is the last of my materials and media that we don't really enjoy so much and we've had a bad experience with. But for now, this has been an episode of Studio Buddy doing a podcast with a little gay guitar. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.